Welcome to the Podghast. Tonight we have with us Calum.
I nearly said welcome. I suppose welcome's kind of appropriate.
Yeah, welcome's fine. And Dave.
Das Vidania.
Excellent. We're being multicultural. That's what we're all about. We're all about that. Okay, on tonight's podcast, we are discussing what happened to Resident Evil, the great horror survival franchise, which at one time was widely critically acclaimed and popular, but is now it's received a lot of criticism for the direction that it's taken.
I think generic's probably the phrase now.
Yeah. So Callum, what's the issue with Resident Evil?
I think there's a kind of a main issue that people always seem to point to is the fact that, you know, you had Resident Evil 4, which is kind of divisive amongst some people, but the big issue with it is, well, no, but there are people that don't like it. There's idiots out there, Michael, that don't like it. But ultimately, the big issue is that what happened was, obviously there was more action in that. They completely kind of changed it up, but when they made the kind of subsequent games following after Resident Evil 5, that cough wasn't good enough to cover that. Actually, we'll need to fix that in post.
Try it again.
But basically, obviously the action elements were way more pronounced, so they thought that was obviously the key to the game. So in subsequent ones, they just ramped up the action, cut back from the horror, and then the kind of survival elements of it, and then it just suffered.
So the thing is, I've never played anything past Resident Evil 4. Dave, you're the same, aren't you? Have you played anything past Resident Evil 4?
Well, we talked about it before we did this cast. I played Return to Raccoon City because they promised us that it was going to be a Resident Evil 2 game, and it was not. And if anything, it soured my taste towards the disassociation with the franchise from its roots more than anything.
What was the gameplay like? What was the gameplay like?
It was like Gods of War crossed with Gears of War, in the sense that it was it was in Raccoon City, and you could, you know, play as other characters from the original, my favourite entry, I would like to say, which is Resident Evil 2. But the problem with it was, it went so mainstream that every now and then you'd have to do a stupid Quicktime event that you would fail at least 4 times before you realised that you were missing something really obvious staring in your face, which was crap and pointless. And it's like, if I wanted to play a QuickTime event, I don't know, I'd buy Let's Dance or something. Yeah. I wouldn't buy a fucking survival horror game, because being chased, there were a few, I'll give it this, a few moments which are quite good, like when the Nemesis was chasing you down, you're like, oh my god, my heart's beating, I'm shitting my pants, I'm running past zombies, and this bloke's going to kill me. And then you run up to a door and it just goes, hey sugar tits, QuickTime event? Like, yeah. No, fuck off.
I think the big problem with it as well, though, is they kind of thought that it's the best way to have the horror was to just keep throwing shit at you. Yeah. So that, like, rather than, you know, giving you time to build up atmosphere and actually, you know, maybe get scared by something, it's just like, more zombies, right, he's killed those zombies, fucking throw something else at him. But there's a shitload of bugs and stuff with it as well. But the whole thing was meant to be that you could rewrite history and go back and kill the main characters from the second game, which everyone was obviously crying out for.
And it's so broken, right? If you don't install the updates, because my internet was down at the time, there's a surprise, I actually walked through a physical wall in that game.
You walked through a physical wall?
That's how broken. I'm not going to lie, because it was quite a difficult, tricky scene, and I walked through the wall by accident. That's how broken the main release was. You know, well, we all know this, the PlayStation 3 and Xbox and Xbone and PS4 all do this shit, which is, you know, congratulations on buying this product. Now turn on your console and wait an hour for fucking updates. But it goes back to what Callum said, which was they threw loads of zombies at you, but the problem with that was, if you look at the original Resident Evil games, even though it was claustrophobic, intense, and these things were going to eat the shit out your face, there was only at any one time a finite amount of zombies on screen.
Do you think one of the big problems is that Resident Evil 4 was a complete departure from the series, but one of the greatest games ever made?
I don't really consider it a big departure, to be perfectly honest.
Really?
I know they went with my favourite version, don't get me wrong, the GameCube version is the best looking version, but my favourite version is the one on the Wii, where you can just flare your Wii remote around like a fucking ninja and just pick people off really quickly. But it had that kind of claustrophobic, creepy element that made you genuinely, apprehensive and scared.
But I mean but that's the atmosphere, isn't it? I mean the actual gameplay.
Yeah, but
itself.
I don't think any Resident Evil had that atmosphere. To be perfectly
No, but
honest.
what Mike's saying is like the presentation and execution of it was totally different to the other ones. Like they completely changed the control
Oh
scheme.
no, I know what you mean. Yeah, like third person and stuff like that. And clearly they went with like Gears of War and shit like that. But
they kind of didn't though, because they've not got the. I mean, Gears of War wasn't out at that point, but they've not got the whole move and shoot thing. You've still got to stand there and do it. They brought that kind of into the later ones, and it kind of, I don't know, it doesn't really work quite so well.
I'm guessing you're not a fan of 4 then, Calum.
No, I'm a massive fan of 4.
Because I really enjoyed it. I thought it's... See, I don't consider it a departure. I consider it kind of where you had to go when you've stuck with a formulatic sort of system for so long games that it's good to mix things up. It's just unfortunately they mixed things up after this to even more an extent and lost what the survival horror was.
I would argue though that the point that I was making is that I feel when I play, like the first Resident Evil game I played was the first one, and I have great memories of the awful acting and the great atmosphere.
Hey there, Wesker.
Yeah,
Jill Sandwich.
And the great survival horror aspects of it, where you were totally shitting your pants whenever you were running out of bullets. That was the ammo was like conservation was a massive part of that game. But when you leap forward to Resident Evil 4, the mechanics of how you actually interact with that world to me are completely different. But it's an amazing game.
Oh yeah. You know what? No. I get what you're saying. I misinterpreted it. I get what you're saying, but it's the last game to me that still feels very much Resident Evil, because even though they mixed up the mechanics and changed the gameplay and it's third person and the way you interact with your weapons is somewhat similar to the prior games, it still very much feels like a Resident Evil game.
Absolutely. But Calum, you've played Resident Evil 5, haven't you?
Oh, shame on you.
I've played a bit of it. I bought it because I got it for like £3 on Steam, but I remember playing it when it came out on the Xbox, because my flatmate at the time had an Xbox 360 and he got Resident Evil 5, and I was like, oh shit hot, if this is going to be like one better than Resident Evil 4. But unfortunately mass very rarely works that way, and I didn't enjoy it at all. It was complete raw action the whole way through it. There was hardly any suspense in it, and it was disappointing because if you go back and watch the trailer for Resident Evil 5, it's really atmospheric. Chris Redfield hasn't been on steroids and jacked up, and it's all, it's him kind of like basically getting scared of shadows. You should watch it. It's like I think it's the old Tokyo Game Show trailer. But I think my biggest issue that I had with it, I mean, like I played through it and I don't know, I just don't think it's on the same level. Some people love it, but they love it for the action. But I think the thing that underlines it is that there's a QuickTime event to punch a boulder. Like you've got to move a boulder, and there's this huge boulder, and Chris Redfield's trying to push it and he can't push it, so you have to press the button to punch it a couple of times, then he can move it, and you're just like, what the fuck's going on?
Fists of steel, son. Fists of steel.
Dave, did you play the third Resident Evil game?
I love it. I'm the only bloke, right?
I was going to say, because a lot of people really don't like that.
I loved it. I loved the whole fact that you could it had the sub game with the mercs and stuff, but it's I don't know, it to me that felt like a perfect Resident Evil game, and I had one of the greatest gaming moments in my life with that game when we were all around my mate's house on what we used to call Video Game Tuesday. It used to be Gran Turismo Tuesday.
Are you going to say something about Jill's skirt?
We used to go over to my mate's house and just play like video games for a Tuesday night, because we all worked at the same place, and constantly we went to work the next day massively hungover and maybe with other medicinal problems, allegedly.
Calpol.
And yeah, pretty much that's a killer. It makes your teeth feel better, but everything else is fucked. I loved mercs. And I was the only bloke out of my mates who beat mercs with the bloke at the end, the third guy who had 5 bullets and a knife. And I made it through
Tofu
mercs.
or hunk?
No, that you're thinking Resident Evil 2.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Resident Evil 3 with the 3. You had Carlos, who turned up in that cough. appalling fucking second movie. What am I saying? The first movie was shite as well.
The first one's almost watchable, I think.
Yeah.
Only because of the laser beam cutscene.
That is quite good. I'll notice you said cutscene.
Oh yeah, there's irony. Oh, and the bloke or the bird who gets a head ripped off in the lift.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and the floating zombie in the water that wakes up.
Look, you're starting to build it
Yeah.
together.
In fact, ignore that statement, people. Two shite. One's.
I think I went to
Passable.
see, with regards to the films, like, I remember watching the first one and thinking, nah, this is okay. But then I went to see one that was, I can't remember which iteration it was, but it was the one where they go to, like, Las Vegas, I think.
That's the third one.
Yeah, and I just remember coming out of that going, well, I'm never watching another one of these movies ever again.
I
But
saw
then-
the second one in Montreal and Raccoon City, and if you pay real, I know this is a gaming podcast, but I'm just going to say this really quickly. If you pay real attention to the street signs in the second movie, you'll see that they all say Toronto or parts of on the bottom of the signs, and when they nuke the city at the end.
They actually
Spoiler.
make part of
I actually
Spoiler.
remember getting in trouble. Yeah, sorry, people, spoilers. Maybe allegedly, I don't know. I do actually remember getting in trouble in the cinema when I actually said, "Yeah, that's the only thing I'd fucking do to Toronto." So
Oh dear.
Yeah,
He doesn't
imagine that
mean
was
that.
divisive.
He doesn't mean that, our listeners in Toronto. He doesn't mean that.
If you check down the description, there's a link to the Anarchist Cookbook. Just want
So what does everyone think then that Resident Evil 4...
can I just finish my quick story because I'm really proud of this and I want people to hear this, even though they're going to laugh at me and just say you're a buffoon and fool. And
On you
not
go.
because they couldn't hear the shenanigans before we made this live about how inept I am at running a computer. Is I beat Mercs mode in Resident Evil 3 with a bloke who only has 5 bullets and a knife, and I was completely sober at the time, and by the time I got to the end of the game, or that section, which is obviously really short because you get like combo points for dodging zombies that recharge your time. I got to the sorry people, spoilers, the briefcase bomb at the end 1 second before it went off, and then my mate Sam turned around and punched me in the arm and gave me a dead arm and just went, "How the fuck did you do that?" And my heart was pumping, and this is what's missing from modern Resident Evil games. My heart was pumping, I was drenched in sweat, and I just looked at him and said in a really girly voice,
I'm James Bond.
I have no idea. And I was a god for a week at work on that day.
There's nothing better though than it's very rare when you're playing a game, especially a horror game, where you genuinely have that moment of feeling just...
You know the comment section is going to be full up of people just going, "Poof, I beat that fucking in 15 minutes." Like,
Let's not
well,
be
I'm
optimistic.
sorry, people.
Comments.
Yeah. So does everyone then agree that the fourth is the best, or is there another entry that you have? Because it's very difficult for me to compare the fourth game and the first game, which are the two that I love.
Yeah, I mean, fourth is the best game in the series, but it's probably harder to argue that it's the best Resident Evil game, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's a very
Rebirth,
solid game.
Like, the remake of the first game on the GameCube is very, very solid.
As is Zero.
Yeah, Zero's pretty good. It's probably not as good as the remake of the first one, though.
Do you think a modern audience now can enjoy the type of gameplay that you see in the original Resident Evil games that was prototyped in the earlier Alone in the Dark games?
Well, the remake, they've just like jazzed up the GameCube version and sold it on PC, and it sold really well, but I think it probably sold to people that were fans already. I don't think it's probably that attractive to a modern audience.
Yeah, it's just because it seems to be a much more laboured and type of game, and I think as well, as much as Resident Evil 4 is far more exciting, I just remember total suspense in that first game.
Well, it's a power thing as well. I mean, if you think about it, in Resident Evil 4, you've got a way better arsenal. When guys grab you, you can, like, you've got a chance of like kicking their heads off. The knife's actually useful for a change. You know, like, there's way more power.
And you can
to
shoot
the player.
chickens. Let's not
Well,
overlook that little gem. You can shoot
That's true.
chickens.
but you can actually shoot properly as well. You can aim rather than just kind of like guesstimating it. So I think once you get more power, the horror kind of goes away from it. And I think that was probably one of the actual scarier elements of the early shit, because you couldn't control yourself properly. You were always panicking, and like you'd have a combination of like fear and frustration when something grabbed you because the fucking tank controls didn't let you get past it.
When did you first play Resident Evil, Dave? Was it the first game?
First game.
On the PlayStation?
On the PlayStation, and I liked it. But if I could be completely honest about one of my life-changing moments in gaming, and that's a phrase people chuck around a lot, but I'm going to be perfectly honest. I liked it, but it was clearly broken in some parts, like very broken. Like it was. I mean, I like a challenge. I don't like modern games where they babysit you, but there's some parts in that game where it was just basically laughing at you and pushing your head in a puddle like a bully at school and just saying, got your nose, got your nose.
Was that difficulty, though, or was it a genuine bug?
No, but there are broken bits. And then there was the Resident Evil 1.5 Director's Cut that came out. Does anyone else remember that?
Yeah, I do. DualShock Edition.
Yeah, it actually had a teaser gameplay of Resident Evil 2. And does anyone remember that the original, and it's still online, the original Resident Evil 2 trailer was made by Romero in Japan.
Yeah, I remember it, and Leon looks about 2 years old.
Yeah, and his wardrobe is shit. Although, excellent haircut, because it's the middle of a zombie apocalypse, but someone found a hairdryer to give themselves volume.
Yeah. Has anyone ever played the there are a number of sort of first person games?
Gun Survivor games.
Yeah. Has anyone
they're
played
alright,
them?
yeah. No, they're alright. And they kind of revisited that sort of franchise on the Wii with
Darkside Chronicles.
Yeah. And what's the other one? Darkside Chronicles and
Umbrella Chronicles.
Yeah, and they're
right.
alright. They're alright.
I enjoyed them. For real shooters, I thought they were pretty solid, although to this day, the best one is still Dead Space Extraction's an amazing game.
Oh,
I've still not tried that. You've always told me about that.
Amazing game.
I think that's better than the standard Dead Space games. I haven't really heard many people say that, but it's Dead Space Extraction is an incredible survival horror game.
It's a perfect juggle between, not just being a gun shooter, even though it's on rails and you would think that would automatically make it linear, but you have to use tools and shit, don't you, to unscrew bolts and stuff and pull out, grids and stuff so you can run away. I love that game. I adore it. And for a Wii game, it's visually stunning.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic. I think the problem with the Resident Evil ones on the Wii for me was that I had went from Dead Space Extraction to them, and they felt much slower. And they didn't feel as innovative as Dead Space Extraction did. I was like, I'd never played an on-rails shooter like that. It didn't even feel like you were on rails. You weren't even thinking.
You felt in control because you could actually lean and move in it as well.
One thing I'd like to bring up then, talking about Dead Space, is Dead Space is a game that carried on the formula from Resident Evil 4 correctly. Dead Space is the kind of game that Resident Evil 5 should have been. The survival horror aspect on that. Oh, yeah, well, it's the only natural progression. Was not the fourth Leprechaun movie in space as well?
Yes, that's what happens. You always have to go into space eventually. Mary Poppins in space.
That's it. But
I'd totally love to see Mary Poppins in a vacuum. Just saying.
I love Mary Poppins.
Well, our bag is probably a vacuum. It seems to have some kind of trans-dimensional portal within it.
And think about it, she's actually imprisoned sentient beings in her bag. She's imprisoned them.
She makes stuff self-aware that she traps them in a chest.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Have you ever seen the horror trailer cut?
Yeah,
Oh, it's excellent.
I'm going to find that after this.
Yeah, it's exceptional. But yeah, Dead Space took it in the right direction, and it's actually a brilliant bit of survival horror, and it took the right amount of action and the right amount of other elements from Resident Evil 4, and that was the right thing.
Agreed.
Just subsequently now, they've just taken the action elements, and they're desperate to try and compete with things like Gears of War, and that's the problem. That's not what Resident Evil's about.
Yeah,
it's about suspense. And can I just go back and say something quick, which Calum mentioned, which is the tank controls. lots of people piss and moan, mainly new gamers who revisit this franchise, which is the tank controls. All right, you know, you pissed and moaned and you complained about them back in the time, but there's no denying it. Those tank controls made the enclosed environments more claustrophobic and definitely added to that sense of, you know, I would say fear and suspense and frustration. You know, every one of us got stuck in a bit in Resident Evil with a save when we were trying to get the fuck out of Dodge, and then we just got stuck to the corner because we were panicking and just turning in a perfect circle continuously.
Yeah, I mean, some of the most intense moments I remember in that first game were just being stuck in a hallway, and being stuck in like one room, and every time you came out there were zombies, and I had like 3 bullets left or something like that, and I was trying to get past them. And that's what really made it, for me, Resident Evil genuinely felt like a survival horror
Isn't it
game.
Based
really had to survive.
upon, didn't they take the idea, Capcom, based upon a mansion game on the NES?
I don't know about that.
A Japanese exclusive.
That rings a bell. That rings a bell. There was some connection to something previous.
I can hear you furiously typing.
Every time Calum types or clicks is mouse
the NES
button.
game that inspired Resident Evil.
Although I know this
an
is
angel
not.
has his wings taken away.
Yeah, I know this isn't a Spectrum fanboy moment, but I have to say, do you know what I technically consider at least the first survival horror game I ever played?
What was that?
Alien on the ZX Spectrum.
Yeah, it's good. It's good
Because it's the same thing, which is, you know, traversing from room to room and not really knowing what's going to be there when you get there.
Yeah, it is on the Spectrum though, so
shut your mouth.
But have you ever played or seen Clock Tower on the SNES?
Yeah, that I know the game you're talking about. I've never played it, but I know.
It's a point and click game. Like the horror in that was always was pretty ramped up and it's way ahead of its time. But the game you were talking about, Dave, is apparently called Sweet Home. It's an RPG that's loosely based on a Japanese horror film of the same name.
And I think they did a reskin of it on the original Game Boy or maybe the Game Boy Color, where they made it a Resident Evil game, but it was pretty much that game. Like
there is a Resident Evil game for the Game Boy Color.
There's one on the yeah, there is, and it's actually quite impressive as far as I remember.
Yeah, well they've got
there's
the
two.
whole game in
Actually, no, there's 2 on the Game Boy Color.
Aye, there's Gaiden as well, but Gaiden's shite. Even though it did bring back Barry Burton, big man Barry Burton.
I don't know why the name Barry Burton's funny, but
Barry Burton, it's
like
because
some
it's
wrestler.
alliteration. He's an absolute king. Barry Burton is the absolute hero of the series, and they don't use him enough. When he came back, the only reason that I bought Revelations 2, the new one, is because big man Barry Burton was back.
But I remember, is there not a Resident Evil on the DS as well?
Yes, Deadly Silence,
Yes.
which is a remake of the original.
If you look hard enough, and I did, but I did a video about it on my channel, and Capcom gave me a very stern warning. You can
stern?
actually
You weren't sending pictures again, were you?
Take this shit down, or we're gonna remove your channel.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I never got a strike, so hey, who knows? You can play a beta on the Game Boy Advance, and it's only like
Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, it's only like the first 3/4 of the first level, but what a bloody achievement to get it into the Game Boy Advance. And yeah, you can actually I'm doing quotation fingers. You can't see this, people, but this is because I'm scared Capcom are going to come around and say horrible things about my mum. You can still find this if you look in the right places, and you can play the beta. And I played it on an emulator on my Wii of 3/4 of the first level, or the first scene, I should say, of Resident Evil 2 on the Game Boy Advance. And you know what? I mean, I know the Game Boy Advance was very competent and pretty advanced, and well, no pun intended, you know, sexy and shit like that. It's really bloody impressive for the compression. It's
Can
like.
we just say, with regards to online download of potentially pirate games that
I only
represented
keep- I
by
only
Dave
keep
Wade
them-
are not necessarily representative of
Hang on
Gaston
now,
Nails.
hang on now, Callum, and hang on now, Mike. I only keep them for 24 hours, which is the allowed legal, allowed legal, point. And then
72 hours was the rumour. was supposed to be someone created a rumor that it was 72 hours.
Yeah,
Suddenly we're all lawyers.
Loads of people got fucked over for that one. No, I only keep games obviously for 24 hours, then I delete them because I don't own the original cartridges.
It's not illegal if you rip them yourself, but it is illegal if you download them that someone else has ripped.
Well, let's away from that. What do we think Resident Evil as a franchise has to do then to
go
to
back
progress?
to its bloody roots?
Well,
No
it
pun
did.
intended.
I don't know if you played Revelations, which first came out on 3DS, and then
I played the
there's
first
now a
one on
PC
my
port.
Wii U.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's more of a departure back to the classic one, and there's a lot to like about it. It's still got the kind of slightly over the top elements, but there's a lot more survival horror in it. Your kind of ammo's a bit more restricted. There is a partner system, so you are followed around by a guy partly, but for the most part, it's just chill
they
herself.
introduced that in Zero, didn't
Martin
they?
Yates.
Fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Your best mate.
Did you not? Was it not Revelations that you and Martin played on the channel?
It was indeed, and then Martin just gave up. No, it wasn't Revelations. Sorry, it was Revelations 2. Because to be fair, it's not a Resident Evil game. It's all right, but it's just ridiculous. It's a parody of itself.
It's in the universe or it's in the franchise, but you play it and it's like that bit in Wayne's World 2 when they go, "Hey, that's Wayne's basement," but that's not Wayne's basement.
Yeah. Do you? I've totally had a flashback to Wayne's World now, and it's completely taken me off my point, Dave. Thanks for that.
Just say this one phrase for me, Mike, and make me happy. Game on.
No, you can't make
you
me.
wanker.
No, the Resident Evil for me though, there was one thing. See, as much as I love the fourth game. See, when they took it away from the sort of Romero zombie.
Oh,
there's
yeah.
a lot of that, and
It became parasites.
And even at the end of Resident Evil, you get into the sort of mutant, idea of it, with the virus. But I preferred it when in that first game where you were going through the mansion and you were dealing with proper Romero zombies who were stumbling and shambling over to you. I really enjoyed that.
And you couldn't get away from them
numbers.
because you were locked in kind of fairly enclosed spaces. But Resident Evil 4, you can just run round them or knife them in the
You
face.
could just ride them.
Ride them. That'd be ace.
That's called necrophilia, my friend.
Yeah, well,
And I'm pretty sure it's
Not unless
illegal.
only if you don't enter them. But
That was so wrong.
God.
well, it feels so right. It's funny though, Resident Evil 4, though, prior to Resident Evil 4, everyone used to say Code Veronica took the series in the wrong direction and said that was too action orientated. But if you go back now, you just realise that's bollocks.
Yeah.
That was a fucking amazing game. In fact,
was a
let's
great
go
game.
back to that. That was a brilliant game.
I've
That
just
wasn't
finished
the
it
one.
again.
That wasn't the one that was originally on the Dreamcast, was it?
Yeah,
Yes,
it was.
Yeah.
And then they added like 7 minutes of cutscenes and re-released it.
On the PlayStation 2, and it had that extra. What was the extra tag title it had?
X.
Yeah.
Very imaginative.
Very
Code Veronica.
good for you, Capcom. Now we know where your budget's going.
So if you could choose then for the franchise to go down the Resident Evil 4 route or back towards Resident Evil 1 route, which ways would you prefer it, gentlemen?
Keep the Resident Evil 4 like controls and the things that were implemented in that, but take it kind of an environment and atmosphere wise back closer to the first one, more labs and kind of enclosed
Are
shit.
you reading my notes? You're reading my notes.
I'm sorry. But it's difficult now because there's actually so many better examples of survival horror games that even if they tried to go back now, I think they've lost their... because once Resident Evil was kind of synonymous with survival horror, but now it's gone. But I mean, there's games come out recently like Alien Isolation that just
that's a
shits
fantastic game.
all
I
over.
actually
Yeah,
genuinely
shits.
had a turtle in my pants when I was playing that game. That game
Michael,
is
tell them the
superb.
story about when I gave you it.
What the story that when you gave me Alien Isolation and then it wouldn't run on my computer?
Yeah, and you installed it and everything.
I know. I downloaded it off of Steam and it didn't work.
Rubbing your grubby wee paws.
I know.
And
Anyway, gentlemen, I think that's us round about the 30-minute mark. So I think we've summed up that Resident Evil.
I think
was
everyone
one-
should say their best Resident Evil game.
Yeah.
But also before that, we should hear what Mike's got to say about it, because we haven't heard so much about him. You tell us where you think it should go, Michael.
Well,
Let's
I'm
flip
a
it
big
round.
fan.
Let's interview Parkinson.
I'm a big fan of that first game. I'm also a big fan of the original Alone in the Dark games, and I like that control mechanism. I think there's a real level of, it's like when you said earlier about being stuck in these confined spaces, and because the controls in those games they're not so intuitive, you do find yourself panicking when a Romero zombie's shambling towards you, whereas in other games you can just run away easily. So I think, as much as I love Resident Evil 4, I would like to see something going back to that sort of original design. Maybe, like you say, a combination of the two.
I'd like to see 2, but with the Resident Evil 4 engine.
Yeah, that'd be good.
A reimagined Resident Evil 2, but with the Resi 4 engine. Can I just tell you a really stupid story about just breaking my wrist? Risk? That's a shit board game. Sorry, people, Risk lovers. My wrist, and being very happy to have done it was. It's when I had my imported Japanese PlayStation, and it was chipped at this point, and I read, because you people out there, you young children who don't understand that we didn't have tinterwebs back in the day. We had to read the black and white adverts in the back of a newspaper.
And find all our porn on the side of the road in magazines.
And under railway bridges.
Yes. And then you'd call all your mates and just go, you won't believe what I fucking found.
Or you wouldn't call them and keep it to yourself.
Yeah. No, because that would be selfish, Mike.
Depends what you found.
I found an advert in the black and white section of the Evening Post about a bloke who was selling imported versions of Resident Evil 2 from the States. And I remember, and this is the only time I'm going to say this because obviously it's a big pain in the ass. I remember I just had the good fortune of breaking my wrist. So I had 2 weeks off work. And then my mate drove me to this guy's house, and I bought Resident Evil 2, and I had enough of my cast cut away so I could play the game. And I stayed up solidly for 2 days.
Dedication.
And beat both discs. And I remember actually thinking, when I looked at my hand, I gave it a kiss and just went, "Thank you for being broken."
Well, it's interesting actually, because Resident Evil 2 was like technically 2 games. So a lot of value for money.
Oh, yes.
Claire's story and Leon's story.
Plus, it was basically the first game to give you kind of, adult-themed cutscenes. And I don't mean, spanking the monkey and shit like that. I mean, the cutscenes in that game were absolutely fantastic and fully realised little mini zombie movies.
Yeah, I mean the cutscenes in the first game are terrible, but there's something really enjoyable about it. I don't know if it's a nostalgic thing. They feel like the films that you would get in the late 80s and early 90s.
Stop! Don't open that door!
Yeah. They were just total B-movies, and porn actors try to break into normal acting roles and things like that.
Have you found my knife? Or way to progress past the statues? I don't know, but I do remember watching it and playing it and enjoying the game, but I do remember thinking, is there a button I can turn fucking subtitles on with? Because this isn't
how human beings speak. Anyway, so Dave, what's your favourite Resident Evil game then?
Resident Evil 2, like a motherfucker, because it's basically the greatest, and I know we're not talking about other franchises, but after Metal Gear Solid on PlayStation 1, it's my second favourite game of all time. That game changed my life in the sense that how many times can you play a game, even though the graphics were brilliant at the time, but still not like, representative of life, that when you're the only person in the house and it's 3:30 in the morning and you realise you got to go and take a piss, you run to the toilet and don't look in any of the doors either side of you because you just think, oh, there might be someone in there. Yeah. And it takes a lot of a game to do that to you. It's an absolutely, and like Calum said, the fact that you get 2 discs, 2 fully playable campaigns that while they interact with each other, they're different enough in themselves to count as separate games. That game is an absolute bloody masterpiece. It's
funny, is it the second game that they play in space?
Yes.
Yeah, that's sort of,
and it's got that brilliant line where He says when Daisy comes up behind him and he's on a speed come down. Remember, kids, don't do drugs.
It's directly quoting Resident Evil.
And he just goes, "Don't sneak up on me." She goes, "Would you like a cup of tea?" And he's, "Don't sneak up on me."
Yeah.
But there's the bit that when
And the
they're
intro
in the cover,
to that episode.
We've got to split up and find as many survivors as we can, and it's just like a direct quote from Resident Evil 2.
Plus, the intro to that episode is because all the intros to people who haven't seen Spaced, sort your fucking life out and watch it. It's fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's a good TV show.
But the fact that
if you love
every
pop culture.
episode had, oh my god, I'm just so upset we never got the third season because he became famous in Hollywood at that point. Especially every episode or intro to the episode was based upon a pop culture theme of the time. But the intro to the Resident Evil, reference in the video was absolutely fantastic when you see him creeping around his apartment with a shotgun and zombies walking around, and it's all like low blues and low blacks and whites on the visuals, and you just hear this and he pumps his shotgun and just goes, "Come get some," which is clearly obviously a reference to Army of Darkness.
Ernest Goes to Camp. Oh yeah, all right. Yeah.
So, Calum, what's your favourite Resident Evil game then?
Definitely, probably has to be
Definitely,
Resident Evil
probably.
4. Resident Evil 4. It's a billion, but
Controversial.
But no, it's not even controversial at all. It's the best game.
And your
Two's the
opinion?
best game.
There's no such thing. There's my opinion. That's verbatim. But I do remember when I got the remake of the first game. It was 2002, and I'd not long had my GameCube. And I used to play it on a TV that we'd taken from an abandoned factory. And if you want to, and I was only like 12 at the time, so
were you
wanna
shoplifting?
This sounds like the start of Return of the Living Dead.
It does.
It was pretty ace. Anyway, it was a not technically stolen, reclaimed television, and I used to play it down at the factory. It was ace because they still had the electricity hooked up.
But the fourth one's your favourite?
Yes.
Did you have to beat a half dissected dog to death with his own crutch and then run away scared?
No, I didn't, but there was giant freezers that you could lock people in. And one time we couldn't get the lever open.
I just got this image in my head of you calling one of your mates and just going, "Dude, come and check this out, it's fucking amazing," and then push them in the freezer and shut the door.
What a childhood.
And just leaving. I think my favourite one, I will admit, I don't think it's necessarily the best game, but I've already said it. The first one, a lot of that's nostalgia though for me. It was one of the first games I played on the PlayStation, and being a massive horror fan at the time, it just totally engrossed me. But I think I would say that Resident Evil 4 is probably the best game in terms of just how fantastically well made it is. Whereas Resident Evil 1 has a lot of...
It's a learning process. They were kind of finding their water wings, if that makes sense.
But it's like watching a well made B movie where you can basically see all the nuts and bolts, but that gives its charm somehow. And I think that's Resident Evil 1 for me would be the one that I would pick.
I think it's interesting though you say it's a learning experience because there were solid improvements right up to 4. Then I'm not entirely sure what happens. Was there some kind of car crash where they had short-term memory loss, and they kind of looked at 4 and they went, right, let's try and take it in this direction, and they just went, hey, we've got a scene with a boulder in it. We've obviously made Chris Redfield bigger.
More people want to see a punch a
a
boulder. That's what the kids want these days.
Thing is, I think we have to not forget as well as a Japanese game, and due to slightly cultural differences, they're slightly zanier than us in certain aspects, and I imagine that's probably part of the reason.
Culturally different likes and dislikes.
Anyone who can buy a live crab and a keyring from a vending machine at the subway station, that makes me concerned.
Is that a real thing?
No, you can buy these little nutrient sacks and you get little sea creatures in them. It's quite dark.
Yeah, and the whole idea is they die, and you're not supposed to care. You're supposed to buy. You're supposed to buy another one, and I'm like,
But then you can also wear worn women's pants
That's
in a
just
vending
cruel.
machine in Japan as well.
Yeah.
So
Oh, and use bubble gum. Let's not forget that one.
anyway,
It's
taking a dark turn.
nightmarish. So thank you very much for joining us this week on the podcast. I'm saying that like this is going to be a weekly thing. It may be, it may not be. I'd like to thank Dave and Calum for their views and Calum's ardent racism. No, you're not racist, Calum, are you?
Well, it's Wednesday. It's usually trying to get to Thursday.
Racist Thursday.
It's Racist Thursday.
Dave,
you caught us on a good
English.
day.
Yeah, we're bringing the union back together, boys. So we'll be back again soon. Please do check out a link to Dave's channel, Long Boys Post 1975. We'll leave a link to that in the description down below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this on iTunes or your favourite podcast feed, you will find a link to his channel in the show notes. And we'll also have all the links to all the Ghastly Tales channels and all that stuff as well.
Can I plug mine as well?
Your channel or yourself?
85 on YouTube.
No, you can't. You really can't. Is that an actual channel?
I want to think so.
And if you have any thoughts or any horror topics you would like us to discuss, please do leave your comments.
And it's very important, people, that you do understand that if you have any thoughts or comments whatsoever on this, is it fair to say, train wreck of a podcast, because I was on it, just remember, Resident Evil 2 is the best. Just saying.
Just agree with Dave and everything will be fine. No, please do let us know what you think of the Resident Evil franchise. Do you think, how do you think it could be improved upon, and what are your favourite Resident Evil games in the franchise? And we will see you in the next podcast. Say bye-bye, everyone.
I don't think we've said that enough. Ghastly
Tales. Ghastly Tales. Alright, bye for now. Say bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.